right. Welcome everybody. It's we're back in the Survivor spirit. I actually have an old school Survivor shirt on for this occasion.
That's right. I've got. Oh wait, no, this is Pete Doris. This is Pete Doris 2022 limited edition horror game month shirt. By the time this goes, pardon me. By the time this episode goes out, not going to be available anymore. So, but I got
Very
Pete's,
relevant
I get Pete's
too
shirt for this. It's very relevant. Very relevant to Survivor.
So this is like a little bit of a special thing. This could potentially be a series because there's a lot in it, and it will definitely not be enough time to do it in one video. So, if in case you aren't aware of this channel, we usually do every week. We'll be going through Survivor seasons, so we'll watch a Survivor episode every week, and then we'll do a Survivor review at the end of the season. The past 2 weeks, we've been doing a season of Black Mirror, though. We've been starting to do that between each season of Survivor as a little break. And we still got a couple episodes left of Black Mirror, but this will be kind of like a little bonus, like already transitioning us into the Survivor vibes. This little thing called The Funny 115, all right? And this is by a man named Mario Lanza, who was like a kind of a prolific Survivor writer at the time. He wrote as they were coming out. You'll see him reference things as like he'll be talking about season 4 and it'll be like 4 years ago, you know, or season 2, you know. It's like it's only a couple of years ago for him.
So he's still kind of fresh in the mind.
So he wrote this actually like as Survivor Panama was coming out. It was like a couple episodes into that season. So very much like right where we're at with your timeline here. So it'll be fun. I actually haven't read them. I previewed the first several ones just to get a feel for it. And, you know, some are longer than others, but mostly they're just like funny random moments in the season. Some iconic moments that we'll definitely remember, and some you might not even have remembered were in the season. At the same time, it's not like an objective writing thing. This is all subjective. He has his own commentary to it. So we could agree or disagree with some things he says too.
That could be interesting.
You know, because a lot of it's lighthearted, random stuff. But you know, he does make some like stakes. Like he doesn't like this player, he likes this player. I'm pretty sure I know that much at least. So as I know, he gets some pushbacks for some of his comments he made. It's funny because some of the things he said he got pushback for are like different than where the fan base is at now. Because I saw like he did an AMA on the Survivor Reddit like years ago.
Yeah.
But it's like completely different than where the fan base, like kind of how like when people were watching Borneo, they hated Richard Hatch at the time, but then people in retrospect loved how he played that season, that kind of thing. So, but I mean, it is still a project of the time. So this is like what 2006, 2007, somewhere around there.
So it's gonna look like, man, I remember what Facebook used to look like back then. You know?
Yeah. So it's like very basic HTML format. You'll notice in the video it's kind of cut off how I'm recording it, because if I record it, it's like super wide screen, so it's not really conducive to also being able to see us. But you'll see, at least you'll be able to see the pictures in the middle and stuff. And if you want to look at this or read them along, you can go to funny115.com. They're all in there. It'll be like countdown style too, so it'll do number 115 all the way down to number 1. So we'll have an easy way to keep track of where we were at.
Why the number 115? Just out of curiosity.
Let me see if he says anything about it in this.
Well, is it like 15 moments per season? No, that doesn't make any sense.
So this is, I specifically waited until now to do it because it spans from season 1 to 11. There's 115 moments through all of them. And then he did another 115 for like seasons 12 to 20, and then another one 21 to 30. So he had a couple more that he did for later seasons.
Oh, okay. Well, cool. Well, someday we'll do it again. It'll take us 3-4 years to get there.
He said, why did I pick 115 nominees? Well, that's easy. It's because I love my readers 15% more than the rest of the Survivor columnists do.
Okay. That's cute.
And then parentheses down here, he says, seriously, I wanted to make it a top 100 list, but there were 15 entries I just didn't want to cut. I felt the page just wouldn't be complete without them.
Okay, that's fair.
So, yeah, we're going to start right into it. I'm going to send him the link.
Do it.
But I was telling Alec before the recording, I didn't show the main page just because there's a little tiny, like, spoilers for the next season we're going to watch. So I figured might as well.
Oh yeah, man, this is classic format here.
Okay, so I guess we can take turns reading like each entry or something.
This is definitely something that I don't remember.
Yeah, yeah.
Right off the
I
bat,
do
all right.
remember it vaguely, but yeah. Do you want to read this one? Or...
Yeah, this Colby's ridiculous hat from Australia, episodes 8 through 12. This is one of my all-time favorite moments, and there was no way I was going to cut it, because in the 8th episode of Survivor, the Australian Outback, Colby all of a sudden has a giant fur-lined hat. He just shows up with it one morning while sleeping, and no explanation is given. We've never seen it before, and we don't see it again for a few episodes, but there it is, perched atop Colby Donaldson's head. Colby all of a sudden has a giant, big-ass bombardier hat. Where did he get it? Did he have it all along? And why did we never see it before? This has always intrigued me, because you can't just drop a giant hat on a guy 8 episodes into the season and not explain it. There should have been a confessional about it, or a snide comment or something. I mean, it's simple editing 101. You can't introduce a character like the giant hat without giving some sort of backstory about it. Did Colby kill an Eskimo to get it? Is he really a Russian Cossack? Are giant fur-lined hats standard winter attire in Cristobal, Texas? What is the story behind the friggin' hat? Like I said, Colby's hat shows up in episode 8 and then it disappears again. But the best part is becomes a few episodes later during the Roger Boot episode, when Colby actually wears the big-ass hat to tribal council. Check it out.
Check it out.
He's like, he's really concerned about it. The big-ass hat even makes a featured appearance when Colby casts his vote.
You look like a little kid in there.
He does kind of look like a little kid. Like I said, this is always one of my favorite unexplained Survivor moments, and that vote for Roger was the last time we ever saw the hat again. I expected Jeff to ask about it during the reunion show, but sadly the audience was left hanging once more. Pity.
Wow. See, these are some like the early seasons, like Australia. We didn't do reactions to, so we might
So we're gonna have a less ingrained memory.
Might remember them more if I could have had them in a thumbnail or something with that bombardier hat on.
Yeah, freaking hat.
Yeah. So
it is a random hat. That's why.
So you can click down on number 114.
Okay.
John Dalton's "Fuck You" vote from Pearl Islands, episode 7. John Dalton was famous for a lot of things in Survivor, but this moment is one of my favorites. John became the first and last person to drop an F-bomb in a voting comment. That may not sound that impressive, but remember this was quite a change from the civil and downright polite votes cast during the first season. Remember Sonia's vote for Rudy in the first episode? I'll miss his skills and speaking his mind openly. Well, John proved that the show had come a long way since then. John was famous for a lot of his voting confessionals during Pearl Islands, because most of them were homages to professional wrestlers. If you know anything about pro wrestling, there are a whole host of John votes that you probably thought were hysterical. But since not everyone follows wrestling, I chose to go mainstream, and this is the vote I chose as John's best, the F-bomb vote. The one that proved just how far voting comment etiquette had fallen. By the way, you can see the historical context of John's vote in this quote from the movie Speed. Howard Payne. See, I'm in charge here. I drop the stick and then pick your friend here up with a sponge. Are you ready to die, friend? Harry, fuck you. Howard Payne. Oh, in 200 years we come from, I regret, but I have one life to give for my country, to fuck you. Thanks, John, for all the great voting comments.
I did not remember. I do remember them editing him out, but I guess I didn't remember that. Yeah, I guess he really is the one person to have done that so far.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I do kind of remember this one where he was like,
Yeah.
I think he's just like, fuck you. Just that was it.
Yeah. He did almost always was a wrestling reference, because he was really big into that.
And he's like with Rupert, he was like, to be the best, you got to beat the best.
Yep.
There's usually a lot more theater to it.
That's one of my, that's got to be, that's one of my,
So
if you want to be the man, if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man right here. Yeah, that is, I don't even like really wrestling. I don't know much about it, but that's one of my favorites. I like that quote a lot.
So was this when Sean got voted out, I'm assuming, so they did vote for Sean. They had a whole beef going on the pre-merge that season.
Yeah.
All right, 113.
All right. Chris and Twila's hammock crash.
Twila.
Yeah. I'm not going to give that up. Vanuatu finale. This moment is short but sweet. Chris Dougherty and Twyla Tanner are the final two players in Survivor Vanuatu. They reached the end of a very dramatic, intense 39 days, especially their last day left in Vanuatu, and that means they can sit around and do nothing all day if they please. Since there's no one left to bug them or get on their nerves, Chris and Twyla decide to take it easy and enjoy their final day before they have to face the jury later tonight. Rather than work around camp and bust their butts like usual, they decide that they're both just going to relax today. And the best way to relax around Camp Alinta, I don't remember that, but is to lay down in the communal hammock. There it is, Chris in the hammock in earlier, happier times. So Chris and Twyla hop up in the hammock together. They start reminiscing about their time here together in the game. And that's when the unexpected happens. That's when the rope breaks and the hammock comes crashing down to the ground. Oh yeah, I remember this now. Yeah,
I love this moment.
Yeah, hop on up, hammock for two. I love the look on Chris's faces here. Wait a minute, am I too fat for this thing? The rope suddenly snaps. Advantage, gravity. And you get a reverse angle shot. Yeah. I love this moment. It's just pure, unadulterated, unexpected, completely random slapstick. If Bob Saget were watching at home, he would have been very, very happy indeed. P.S. Surprisingly, this isn't the only appearance by the Yasser hammock on the Funny 115. Oh, it comes back. That's good.
Oh, I'm guessing it's when there was like a moment with Chris lying in the hammock. He said something.
Yeah, there was Chris lying in the hammock. But there was a moment when he was lying in the hammock and they're all just like fighting over him, like openly.
Yeah, maybe
that might be it.
Yeah, this is a fun moment though in the hammock. Vanuatu was a fun time, huh?
Yeah, it was a really interesting season.
And Chris and Twyla, a great final too, huh?
Yeah.
Number 112.
I mean, they're a pair, that's for sure. Aren't they a pair?
All right, Rob votes for Sheehan. Rob Zabachnik was the king of unintentional humor. Oh, he wasn't always trying to be funny, but for whatever reason, the Sukjai skater boy never failed to crack me up. You see, Rob was so good at saying something inappropriate or putting his foot in his mouth when he spoke that he ended up making people laugh almost by accident. And that's why he was so good at being funny when he really hadn't been trying to. One of Rob's most memorable moments from Thailand was the vote he cast for Sheehan at the end of episode 5. You see, he had been feuding with the She-Devil for most of her time on Sukjai, and the two of them, of plain and simple, just didn't get along. So Rob was more than happy to cast a vote for her at Tribal Council on night 15. He walked up to the podium, he wrote down her name, and he spoke his reasons aloud, and the resulting quote will go down in Survivor history. Sorry, girl, you get on my nerves and I don't like being around you. Nothing personal. That was always one of my favorite quotes from Thailand, and nobody but Rob Zabachnik could have said it. Isn't that the definition of personal, Rob? How about you just punch her in the face, too? Anyway, this was just a total Rob moment all around. It was certainly appropriate for a guy who brought a skateboard to Thailand as his luxury item. That's right, he's the guy who brought a skateboard to the beach. This is far from the last time that Rob will appear on the Funniest Moments list. In fact, we'll be seeing him again real soon. P.S. I call Rob the king of unintentional humor, but in fact, I can think of 4 other survivors who could possibly challenge him for the title. They're Heidi Strobel, Judd Sargent, Matthew Von Ertvelda, and Chris Daugherty. They will all be well represented on this list, but for my money, I still think Rob is the funniest. Nothing personal.
That's what I think. I kind of agree with that too, because I was always like cringing every time he did something he thought was like cool or edgy or whatever, and I was like, what?
These are always fun characters. Like all the ones he named.
Judd's up there. Judd's way up there for sure.
Judd.
Chris Daugherty. Yeah, honestly, Chris is kind of up there too.
Well, yeah, Matt and Amazon.
Yeah.
And Heidi. Yeah, Heidi was very not self-aware. So it's
good. Good stuff.
You love Rob with 2 B's.
We do. Rob's he had a redemption arc that we highlighted in that episode.
Number 111.
Crazy Matt gets scolded by his mom. Speaking of unintentional humor, we've reached a subtle moment that a lot of people don't seem to remember. It happens in the 11th episode of Survivor the Amazon when Matthew Von Ertvelda's mother comes out to get a reward and eat dinner with him. Oh, yeah. Okay, so true facts, when he said Matthew Von Ertvelda, I was like, I don't remember exactly this. Now that I'm seeing a picture, I'm like, oh yeah, this guy, he's up there. You may remember that Matt had a fair bit of difficulty in bonding with the rest of his tribe during Amazon. Never really seemed to connect with anybody, and to be honest, most of the other players were a little bit frightened by him. And why did Matt stand out so much as being different? Well, for one, the guy didn't talk like anyone else. He had a very formal way of speaking, probably from his time spent living in Hong Kong, and he used odd words and sentences that nobody else in the world would ever use. One of my favorite examples of this is in episode 3, when Matt wants to serve his tribe fish for dinner. It comes to the campsite doesn't have proper seasoning or service vessels. Honestly, have you ever heard the word surface vessels in a sentence? It's not something like an alien or a James Bond villain would say. Oh, it's true. But Matt always spoke like that. That's why all the humans all thought he was a bit off.
Yeah.
They weren't really sure what to make of him. They weren't really sure what planet he was from. They all knew that he didn't speak like a normal human being. But like I said, the Matt moment makes the 111 spot happen when his mother came to visit in the 11th episode. The two of them shared dinner together and had a conversation about how things were going back home. And in the funniest moment of the evening, Matt's mom actually smacked him down for being too formal. Crazy Matt got dissed by his own mom. It was just a quick moment in the episode, but it was priceless. Here's the actual dialogue. Mom, I talk to you at home. Even if I don't see you, I talk to you. Matt, oh, I like that. I appreciate it. Mom, pause. Don't be too formal. Matt and his mom at dinner. Anyone else would have said, the food was awesome, but no, in typical Matt fashion, he just said, we admired the buffet. This scene just killed me because even though the other players were scared to death of him, it showed that Crazy Matt had a mommy who could still scold him if he didn't talk like a normal human being. Not only was it funny, it was actually sort of cute. Way to go, Mrs. von Ertfelda. Keep your son in line for us. Tell him to stop learning Swedish for fun and keep him away from all those scary-looking machetes. Oh, and tell him to wash his own damn service vessel while you're at it. I totally forgot about that.
And that was a gold mine in the Amazon for sure.
Yeah, he was, man.
Yeah, another one of those where he's like in his own world and like became a character like larger than himself, essentially. You know, with the machete scene and moments like this. All right, number 110. Brian has no idea what Sheehan's name is. This comment happened at the very start of Thailand episode 8, and unless you were paying attention, you might have missed it. And it's a moment that has always made me laugh because it could have only been spoken by Mr. Freeze himself, the one and only Lord Brian Heidick. At the beginning of the 8th episode, Brian, Clay, and Ted are debating who they think the Sukjais are going to be voting out. The obvious answer is Sheehan, of course, because she has burned all her bridges with everybody on her tribe. But the funny thing is that when discussing the topic, Brian can't seem to remember Sheehan's name. Even though he's been her friend for the past 3 days, Brian has no idea what the girl's actual name is. Brian, like I said, if they vote off Suyi, Sinjo, then they're not thinking. This moment isn't actually that funny on the surface, but I've always found it to be hilarious once you realize that A, Brian had spent the past 3 days kissing ass to Sheehan and telling her she was part of the family. B, Brian had spent the majority of the past 3 days thinking Sheehan was their only hope of breaking a 5-5 tie. C, Brian was so good at this game that I almost considered him a borderline sociopath, and it's entirely possible that he never actually considered Sheehan to be an actual person with an actual name. D, Brian was such a control freak that he was usually aware of everything that happened around him at all times. E, Brian is probably the single best player in the history of the game, yet when confronted with an Asian name, he turns into my dad trying and failing to order a plate of Chinese food. So here's this control freak who has complete control of the game, yet he doesn't even know the name of a girl he was relying on as a potential ally. So then you stop and think, well, maybe Brian's just not good with Asian names. After all, there are lots of people in the world, aka my dad, who don't see Asian words that often, so they tend to butcher them anytime they're trying to pronounce one. So maybe Brian just isn't comfortable with Asian names. And then you remember, oh wait, his wife is Asian. So I guess that can't be it. So why on earth couldn't Brian remember her name? Well, my personal opinion is that he was so cold and distant to the other players in the game, and he treated people so much like pawns and chess pieces that I bet he didn't even remember half of their names. I don't think it had anything to do with Sheehan at all. I think the Sheehan comment was the only time that Brian slipped and actually displayed his true nature while on camera. And that's why I think Brian was alternately the best player of all time, while alternately being the scariest player of all time. He was so good at distancing himself from people that it was really altogether quite frightening. And this moment is funny to me because it was the only time in the game we ever really saw Brian slip up and give away the fact that he was a sociopath. And if you don't believe me, just go ask Su Yi.
Su Yi Han being voted out on day 21. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's like horribly offensive. Yeah. Oh my, all these things are amazing.
Really, yeah. Yeah, he definitely, like, people saw this, he saw this. I mean, sociopath vibes, literally, from Brian Heidick.
I mean, that's kind of what our whole joke was the whole time, that he was just like logic man, and these aren't people. They're just like, how do I empathize? Like that's not a thing that Brian Heidick knows how to do.
Like, there's a different, they talked about this Machiavellian type of playing the game. There's a difference between how he played the game and how Boston Rob played the game. or Richard Hatch played the game. Like,
Mm.
there's something way more unsettling about how Brian Heidick was, did not even acknowledge Sheehan's name.
Suyi
It's
Sinjo.
really not. It's really not hard.
It's not. It's Sheehan. Like what? Uh,
We're
That's
109.
yeah, we got Amber. Amber. What?
Yeah, you probably won't remember
This
this.
is Vanuatu episode 1. John Palahniuk was one of the all-time best could-have-beens in the world of Survivor. He could have been such an amazing character, and he was so entertaining to watch that it was a damn shame that it lasted less than 10 days in Survivor Vanuatu. I really think he would have been one of the all-time greats. Great characters, that is. I don't care if he would have been a great player or not. All I care about was that he would have been a great character to have in the show. Anyway, JP's greatest moment comes in the opening episode of Survivor Vanuatu. Because not only does he butcher the pronunciation of a simple word, he actually does it more than once. He first butchers the word Aboriginals and then butchers the word Ember. And the editors must have thought this was funny as hell because they made sure to focus on both incidents and give them special attention.
I do kind of remember this.
In fact, JP's struggle with the English language was the single biggest highlight of the Vanuatu premiere. We can't seem to get fire. The Aborigines did this. Why can't we?
Yes.
That was the Aborigines line was funny enough, and it was nothing compared to his later comment. You know, the one where he was discussing the Lepevi attempts to create fires, and how all they could get was hot embers. And I'm sorry, did I say embers? I meant to say ambers, right, John? We had a hot amber going, and I was like, guys, we have a hot amber. Yeah, we've got amber. Just for reference sake, we'll now turn to the pages of dictionary.com in the hopes of clearing up this linguistic mystery. Ember, noun. A hot, glowing, or smoldering fragment of wood or coal left from a fire. Synonym, coal. Amber, noun. A hard, translucent yellow, orange, or brownish yellow fossil resin used for making jewelry and other ornamental objects. 2. A brownish yellow. 3. That shit they extracted from the dinosaur DNA from in Jurassic Park. 4. Mrs. Mariano. So in other words, the Lepevi tribe wasn't able to create fire in the first few days of the game. Yet they were able to summon the winner of Survivor All-Stars in much the same way you'd summon a genie out of a bottle. They rubbed 2 sticks together, and according to JP, the Lepevis were thereby able to produce amber. I really wish JP had stuck around a few more episodes. He had the potential to be a Survivor legend.
Yeah,
That's great. This person had to have had the DVDs or something, too.
Yeah.
Like, how else could they? I mean, I guess they were writing about Survivor a lot, so. But
that's a fun one. That I do remember that, but you wouldn't think of it. So it's nice
great.
to have it highlighted.
That's great.
Number 108. 2 B's. 2 B's, guys. Yes. The moment wasn't as laugh out loud hilarious as some of the others on this list, but I always thought it was funny and charming in a sweet kind of way. Day 18 was Rob Zabachnik's last day in Survivor Thailand. Sukchai had lost the logic flag puzzle immunity challenge. They were going to tribal council that night, and most everybody knew that Rob would be the one going home. His time in the game was just about up. The problem, however, was that nobody on Sukchai knew how Rob was going to react. Here was this kamikaze skater punk who had a motor mouth, a hair trigger, and was a stressed-out bundle of energy at all times, and I think people were a little worried about what his reaction was going to be. What would happen when Rob saw his name come up at Tribal Council? Was he going to snap and start screaming at everyone? Was he going to throttle somebody like he had tried to strangle Clay? Was he going to tear up the Tribal Council set like a 5-year-old throwing a temper tantrum? Or was he going to fling himself down to the ground and protest like he had just stepped on another stingray? All of those seemed like very legitimate possibilities, and nobody was entirely sure what was going to happen. Even though Rob had given an emotional speech around the campfire that night, talking about how much he loved everybody and how much the game had changed him, deep down I think Sukchai was still a little wary of him. He had seen too many random outbursts to think he would actually be able to control himself. Rob just seemed like he was destined to go out with a bang. All of this was interesting, but it really didn't matter to Sukchai because tonight was the night Rob was supposed to go home. So one by one they walked up to the voting podium and wrote down his name. Everybody in the tribe voted for him, and then they came back to their seats to wait and possibly brace themselves for how he was going to react. And what happened is the number 108 moment on this list. 2 B's, guys. The votes start coming up one after the other. ROB, ROB, ROB. But the funniest thing was that Rob wasn't even all that upset. Everyone expected some sort of outburst, but it never did come. It turned out that Rob truly had changed and grown up since his epiphany around the campfire just a few hours before. In fact, he seemed downright amused by the fact that he was leaving the game. The only reaction from Rob at all was when he jokingly corrected all the misspellings of his name. He simply chuckled and said, two Bs, guys, and that was it. There was never anything even close to an angry outburst. Rob just walked up to have his torch snuffed, told Jeff, thanks, brother, and then thanked everybody for playing the game. He said, much love, and my hat's off to you guys, and that was it. There was no anger or no drama whatsoever. Rob Zabachnik's exit from the game wasn't all that funny on a comedic level, but the fact that his reaction surprised everybody has always made me chuckle. And the Stu B's quote is one that stuck with me even to this day. The phrase was cute, it was charming, and it was easily one of the best moments of the entire season. And it came from Rob Zabachnik, one of the best characters we've ever had on the show.
He does like Rob. I mean, Rob is the standout because that season was pretty rough, and yeah, that's why that stands out as a best moment of that season.
He's a memorable
that's it.
character.
Rob's redemption. Sure. That was his redemption arc. He didn't flip out. He was just kind of wholesome in his oh my god. I just clicked on the next one.
Number 107.
Frank plays a sex game. I don't remember this at all, but we're gonna get into it because this is a long one here. This moment is absolutely classic. Frank Garrison from Africa is another character I could have listed under the kings of unintentional comedy. The guy had so many bizarre moments during the season, so many weirdly phrased quotes that he's always been one of my favorite characters. I really had no idea what he was talking about half the time, and that's saying something when you consider the completely unintelligible Tom Buchanan was a cast member in the same season. And I have to say that, honestly, sometimes Tom was a little easier to understand. For those of you who didn't see Africa, here's a little backstory. Frank Garrison was a retired military man with an extreme, and I do mean extreme, conservative streak. He was a member of the NRA. He had little to no tolerance for gays or liberals of any sort. He was extremely gruff or bossy if he thought you weren't pulling your weight. All of these things are true. Oh, yes, and he was also extremely antisocial. He didn't seem to enjoy socializing. He really had no idea how to relate to other people, and he even avoided the other players at the post-merge feast celebration just so he could go out and gather firewood. Yeah. In other words, he was pretty much the ultimate survivor buzzkill. It may sound like I'm making fun of Frank, but I'm really not. In truth, I liked him on the show very much, and I'm actually a lot like him in several ways. But I just found it fascinating how far Frank would go out of his way to not have to deal with other people. He'd do anything to avoid socializing. He was incredibly stiff and formal, and, like Matthew von Ertfelda, he didn't seem to quite speak the same language as the other players. All the words were coming out in English, of course, but they just didn't seem to come out right. That's... This guy, by the way, to pause for a second, this guy's writing is awesome.
Yeah.
But this is great. He's a fantastic writer.
Yeah.
That's really the only way I can describe it. In fact, some of the comments Frank made during Africa were so bizarre and were worded so strangely that I've never really forgotten them. 4 years later, and I can still recite the best Frank quotes almost off the top of my head. Silas, hey Frank, is Linda solid? Frank, she's so solid, she's buried in the bottom of Hoover Dam. Kim, hey Frank, what branch of the service are you in? Frank, I was in the American branch. It's called Freedom. What a guy. When Samburu is trying to make fire and the younger members complain that it's a lot of work. Frank, I spent 9 months in the softness of my mother's womb. Everything else after that's hard when you come out. Oh my god, that's actually a great quote. It's like up there with the Boy Meets World, life's hard, wear a helmet. Keep in mind that Frank wasn't trying to be funny in any of these quotes. That's just the way the guy talks. So you can see what was funny when the Moto Magis,
I think.
Moto Magis? I don't remember that. Oh yeah, that was the other tribe name, right?
That's just when they merged, I think. Because that was the merged name.
The Moto Magis tried to get into play a sex game in episode 7 of Survivor Africa. It happened right after the merge, and the Moto Magis were having themselves a feast. Food had been delivered, the players were celebrating and joking around, and wine was flowing liberally around the camp. Everybody was having a great time. Well, except for Frank, that is. Frank was off gathering wood somewhere because he wasn't interested in sitting down and joking around. It just wasn't a very Frank thing to do. The picture. The rest of the tribe was having a great time at the party, and they soon turned to a pseudo-sex game called I Never. The purpose of this game is to say something you've never done, and everyone else on the tribe had to go around in a circle to admit if they actually had. You know, such as I've never had a threesome, or I've never done it on an airplane, or I've never done it on a boat, I've never done it with a goat. You know, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Everybody's stories were expected to be a little dirty, and it was just more or less a big icebreaker. Anyway, here comes Frank walking by, and one of the Moto Magis gets a bright idea, and they should ask the guy to play. So they call him over and explain the rules, and tell him he has to say something he's never done. Kim, oh my god. I read ahead a little bit because that's how I work, and I just remembered what he said because of that. Kim Powers tells me that it has to be something true, and Frank seems to understand this concept, so he tries his best to give them something juicy they can all play around with. I've never broken the honor of the handshake. I think we laughed about this for a while when we were watching it. There's this wonderful pause after he says this because nobody on the tribe is sure how they're supposed to react. Is Frank joking? Is he just messing with them? And then it becomes clear that he's not trying to be funny. It was the most risque thing he could come up with. Frank seems to realize they were waiting for more, so he quickly adds, "It's just a golden rule I was brought up to live by." And the reaction of everybody when they finally respond is priceless. "Oh, good job, Frank. That's great. Yeah, good one. That was a really good answer. I'm very respectful for that." So Frank wanders off to go gather some more wood and maybe go play with an elephant. And the sex game continues without him. Only this time nobody asks Frank if he wants to participate anymore. Great moment.
Great moment.
That is a great moment.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Frank is one of those as well. I wonder if we'll get the date with Brandon on here too.
Oh, that better show up.
I mean, it's like it's hard to picture in your mind. 115 moments, what's gonna.
I know, but these are some pretty great. These are pretty good ones.
Number 106. James Miller, the Oracle of Oolong. Okay. This is one of the moments on my list that not many people would have caught because it takes place over several episodes and is only funny if you go back and look at it in retrospect. It's also a good example of why I say that the second viewing of a season is way better than the first, because the second time around, you can catch many of the subtle things you missed while the season was going. Or in this case, you can catch what the editors were trying to do with Redneck James. James Miller was one of my very favorite characters ever on the show. The guy was a steel worker from Alabama. He talked with a very distinctive twangy southern drawl. He looked a little bit like Gilligan from Gilligan's Island, and he's one of the cockiest little mofos you've ever seen on the show. James had an opinion about everything. He loved to talk about what the other players were doing wrong, and in interviews he talked a very, very, very big game. He talked so much, in fact, that the producers had a lot of fun with his editing along the way. Why do I say so? Because everything that James predicted during the course of Palau ended up being wrong. And I'm not kidding. Nearly every single time he says something will happen during the season, it ends up not happening. He's wrong nearly every single freaking time. And like I said, it's not something you can really notice until you go back and watch the season a second time. James is a know-it-all. James talks quite confidently about the game is going to develop, and James is wrong nearly every single time. In other words, James Miller ends up being the single worst oracle in the history of Western society.
Wow.
In anticipation of writing this column, I actually went through Palau and wrote down every single James declaration just to illustrate my point, and you'll be stunned at how often his predictions failed to come true. So here we go. It's time to play the James Miller prediction game. Just sit back and enjoy the ride. All right, number one, the setup is that after Oolong loses the first immunity challenge, James is speaking to the rest of the tribe. He says, "We're going to win some matches. We just didn't do it today." Outcome wrong. Oolong never won a single immunity challenge. Setup. In an interview, James comments on how Oolong doesn't need a leader. They'll do just fine working as a team. Statement, "We're Americans, and we're going to do democracy." Wrong. Oolong's lack of a leader doomed them time and time again. Setup. Before Tribal Council number 2, James confidently states in an interview that he knows who will be going home. "So I'll tell you how it's going to happen. Kim is gone." "Oh yeah, for sure." Wrong. Ashley ended up going home. Kim lasted 6 more days. Oolong is crushed that they lost their third straight immunity challenge, so James tries to bolster their morale with a rousing Colby-esque pep talk.
Colby-esque.
We're not going to travel again. You guys understand me? Wrong. Oolong went to travel every single week. Oolong and Crow compete in a reward challenge to build the best bathroom. The winning tribe will know they've won when they get a visit and homemade shelter from the Survivor construction crew. So the Oolongs are waiting for the construction crew to arrive in a boat, and James confidently predicts to his team it's going to happen. "I think we won, no doubt. Look at it. It's perfect. They'll be back in about, I estimate, 2 to 3 hours." Wrong. The construction crew never came back. Crew won the challenge. James is upset that he lost the construction challenge, and he vows in an interview that Oolong will get revenge against the other tribe. But that's all right. It just makes us more angry that we lost. We're ticked off, so we're going after them. We're going to run through them like a dang bulldozer. Wrong. Oolong continued to lose. No revenge was ever had. James tries to rally his tribe before the 4th immunity challenge. They won the first 3 times. It was their time. It's our time now. Wrong. It continued to be Kuro's time. The 6th immunity challenge involved tying knots, and James confidently proclaimed that Oolong would win. James was going to see to it himself because he was once in the Navy and could create a special unbeatable knot that nobody on Koror would ever be able to untie. I know a few things about knots. Wrong. Jen and Janu had no trouble with James Uber knot, and Karor easily won the challenge.
As Uber not.
James knew he was in no danger at the Sixth Tribal Council because he had very solid allies in New Long. Bobby won't vote for me, I'm sure. Wrong. Bobby John voted for James at Tribal Council. Muslim contestant Ibrahim was spared at the 5th Tribal Council, but James stated in an interview he wasn't going to happen again at the 6th. Ibrahim's overstayed his welcome. He was meant to go last time, and by the grace of Allah, he didn't go. Now my God says he is today. James and his God were wrong. James was voted out of the 6th Tribal Council.
You and your God were wrong, James.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. James' inability to predict the future was one of the funniest running subplots during Palau. It happened time and time again and was made even funnier because James was just so darn confident. Okay, I'll say it. He was downright cocky. In fact, I've never seen a player so confident, so sure of himself, yet so consistently wrong. And the combination of the two was something the editors must have been loving. They turned to James time and time again during Palau because they knew he would always deliver the goods. The James Miller confessionals were always Survivor gold. And even though I'm making fun of the guy, I do have to hand it to James at the same time. He was one of my favorite characters of the season, and it was because the guy was absolutely resilient. He never gave up, he never surrendered, because even when he was wrong, and he was always wrong, it never really seemed to faze him. James would mutter a quick "hell yeah," and then it was right on the next day's predictions. He never got down or got mad at himself in the slightest. It was just another day's work for James Miller, the reliably unreliable Oracle of Palau. Yeah, Mario's going to put my ass in the top 10. No way he drops me all the way down to number 106. Hell no, come on. Special note for the nitpickers, yes, there was actually one prediction that James made in Palau that ended up coming true. He predicted that Kim would go home at Tribal Council number 4, and astonishingly, he turned out to be correct. I guess the editors wanted to throw him a bone that week, because it's the only time in Palau he was ever actually shown to be correct. Hell yeah.
Man, I guess I didn't realize that, but yeah, he was very confident. I got that, but I didn't realize like how
Love how he really gave it all to us. Like he's doing us a treat, refreshing our memory, and that was funny.
James,
James is always a fun time.
Here we go. Oh yeah, we have one. We have one. We have more. Don't we have a couple of these on our thumbnails?
Yeah, I think so. There's at least one.
Chad's open mouth gape. Vanuatu, multiple episodes. There was something a little different about Vanuatu's Chad Crittenden. It's hard to place your finger on it, but there was just something about the guy that really made him stand out from everyone else. Took me a few episodes to figure it out, but in time I finally identified the mystery variable. I finally figured out what made Chad so different from everybody else. And the funny thing was, it had nothing to do with the fact that he had only one leg. When I used to write my Survivor novels, I had one hard and fast rule that I never wanted to break under any circumstance. I never wanted to describe a character's mouth being open wide with surprise. I mean, it sounds good in print and all, but it's such a ridiculous writing cliche that I never ever wanted to see it in my story. After all, whose mouth actually opens wide with surprise? Does that actually happen in real life, ever? Has it ever happened? Why do so many writers insist on using that phrase? In fiction, why are Survivor's players' mouths always popping open in surprise? Like I said, I would never use that phrase in my stories because I thought I thought it was retarded. but then Chad comes along in Vanuatu and actually does open his mouth every time something surprising happens. He actually proved me wrong. It turns out there are some people in the world who actually open their mouth wide every time something surprises them. I wouldn't have believed it to be possible, yet with Chad it happened time after time after time. Chad's mouth was agape so many times in Vanuatu that he started to look like a blow-up doll. Either that or the Zoltar machine in the movie Big. And the visual of Chad opening his mouth in surprise ended up being one of my favorite running sight gags in Survivor history. I'll probably even use it as a running joke later on this list. You just watch and see. P.S. Chad wasn't even the only open repeat jaw droppers in Vanuatu. Eliza did it on more than one occasion. Yeah, she did it a lot too. Especially Tribal Council. And that's one of the other reasons I've always loved Vanuatu. It's the season of the jaw droppers. Right, Chad and Eliza?
Yeah, that's good.
That's great.
I feel like we have some thumbnails with us with the open mouth face? I feel like we have a couple.
Yeah, I've done it before.
Yeah.
There's some of the thumbnails of me doing goofy stuff like that.
That's like the freaking, but they're like the thumbnails that people will pose for. These YouTubers will pose for their thumbnails.
Yeah.
I think we got a genuine open mouth Gape.
Yeah, no, I do.
know.
Sometimes. That's maybe it is seeing sometimes I've noticed sometimes like people will sometimes generally like emulate thing. I mean, I know that's something that I've definitely done. So like when I'm surprised, I'll sometimes like do that, but sometimes you can't help it, Opening your mouth is a good way to show surprise.
Yeah. By the way, we have to cut off our own, or make our own cutoff point for this video too, because it's like I don't even know an even way to split
Yeah.
up 115. Do we
I
just
do.
go to
Who
100
knows?
for this one, or?
Yeah, I guess we could. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good with whatever. This is great though. I love this. This is really fun.
Number 104, Dina gets tagged in the head. All right. Lots of people
What?
remember this moment, even though it was only a quick insert shot that lasted less than a second. But everyone seems to remember it mainly because it involved Riverside District Attorney Dina Bennett being smacked in the head by a slab of meat. It was short, it was funny, and here are all the gory details. It was episode 6 in the Amazon, and Tambaki and Jabaru were competing in one of the most unique challenges in Survivor history. With their hands tied behind their backs, they were supposed to rip slabs of meat off a giant bone and drop the slabs onto a scale.
Right.
The tribe that compiled the most raw meat in their basket by the end of the challenge won immunity. It was actually quite simple. The entire challenge was a tribute to the eating habits of the most famous carnivore in the Amazon, the piranha, and it also happened to be flat out disgusting. I was sure it was a memorable challenge to watch on TV, but it also made you sort of sick watching it at the same time. You got Rob and Matt ripping meat off the bone with their teeth.
Yeah, they're just going in
Yeah.
at it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gruesome. Anyway, Tamaki won the challenge, and they were celebrating the fact that they didn't have to go to tribal council. And as the other tribe, Jabaru, was wallowing in their defeat, Dina Bennett wasn't paying attention, and everybody got a good laugh when the giant meat bone came swimming by and cracked her on the side of the head. Kapow! Here's a frame-by-frame capture of the incident.
There it comes.
From the way Dina's head went forward and to the left, we have proof that the meat bone acted alone. Like I said, this was just a quick insert shot that was kind of silly, but it never fails to make me laugh. I mean, after all, it really is the oldest principle in the world of comedy. You just can't go wrong with people being whacked in the head by a giant slab of meat.
It's true. I mean, you can't. It's hard to beat that.
I honestly didn't remember this, though. I guess that
I
people
didn't
remembered
either.
it at the time, though, for sure.
I guess so. Yes,
Maybe
people are
I'm
like,
not
yeah,
a good
remember
enough
Dina
fan.
gets slapped by that meat right in the back of her head? I mean, it is a good slapstick moment. So
Yeah. Number 103.
Right, oh my
Yes.
God. This is one of my all-time favorites. I quote this all the time. I quote it incorrectly all the time, but John lies, but he tells the truth too. My favorite. I actually hesitated to include this moment on the list because I wasn't sure if I was the only one who thought it was funny. Nope, I think it's hilarious. I think it's one of the funniest things in Survivor. After all, it's not the type of moment that would jump out at you the first time you saw it. But upon further reflection, I came to realize that, damn it, I don't care if no one else agrees with me. This is one of my favorite Survivor quotes of all time, and I look forward to it every time I watch Pearl Islands. It always cracks me up, it always cracks my wife up, and the fact that it is delivered with a thick Mississippi accent is pretty much just icing on the cake. So welcome, Dara Johnson, to your very first appearance in the Funny 115. Sorry if you didn't mean it for it to be funny at the time. The backstory. John Dalton is at a very pivotal stage in the game towards the end of Pearl Islands. He has managed to get rid of Rupert, which is good, and on top of that, he has managed to sucker everybody into thinking his grandma just died, which is even better. In other words, John suddenly has a lot of power. But on the negative side, John has also lied to just about everybody in the game. He has two mortal enemies, Sandra and Krista, who absolutely hate his guts, and people routinely call him a snake because he can't be trusted. This is a very pivotal moment in the game for John Dalton. He absolutely needs to find some new players he can dupe, and he is lucky to find them when he joins Lil and Dara on an overnight trip to a local spa. In other words, Lil and Dara are the patsies that he needs to get himself into the final two. John starts working his magic on the two women at dinner that night, but he eventually ends up zeroing in on Dara, the cute young mortician from Mississippi. Lil is off pouting by herself for some reason or another, which happens at least twice every episode. So John is able to get Dara alone, and he starts promising her a trip to the final two. John makes the offer, Dara agrees, and all appears to be right in the world. John is going to take Dara with him to the final two. And his final two doesn't sound too bad for either one of us. Well, of course we know this isn't true. John hasn't told the truth a single time yet in this game. But the funny thing is that Dara actually falls for it. She knows that John is a snake. She knows that John lies to everybody. She knows that John has screwed just about everybody in the game. Yet, for whatever reason, she thinks that this is the time that he's actually telling the truth. Dara then explains to us why she's going to trust John, and in her interview, she utters one of my all-time favorite Survivor quotes. John's a snake, yeah, and he lies, but he also tells the truth, too. Well, no
Right.
shit. Thank you, Dr. Obvious. I have no idea why this quote strikes me as so funny, but I swear to God, it's one of my favorite moments in Pearl Islands. John lies, but he also tells the truth too. Well said. I asked my wife why this quote was so funny because she always laughs at it too. I couldn't place my finger on it, so I needed a second opinion. And she explained it this way. Well, it's funny because the first thing has nothing to do with the second thing. So she's comparing two things, truth and lies, that don't have to be mutually exclusive of one another. So in other words, it's like saying, this car goes fast, but I don't like it because it goes slow too. It's just a ridiculous quote all around. Another meaning to this phrase would be, this pit bull bites kids in the face, but I bought it because it doesn't bite kids in the face too. See, it's fun to think these up. Another good one would be, pirates are bad because they plunder and rape, but they also don't plunder and rape too.
Yes.
Can you come up with any better ones? Anyway, I don't mean to make fun of Dara. I know the quote just came out differently because than she intended it. She probably meant to say something like, yes, John has lied a lot of times in this game, but it's in the best interest to go with me to the end, so I think he's telling the truth this time, and that's why I'm going to trust him, even though I know I might get screwed. That would have been a much more elegant way of phrasing it, but no, in the heat of the moment, she phrased it somewhat poorly and said gave us one of the most meaningless Survivor quotes of all time. John lies, but he tells the truth too. Good point.
This
Also,
moment
P.S.
is funny, but it's also
it's
not.
funny, but it's also not funny too. Okay, I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, yeah. You can go. We have that episode. I call it "The Honest Snake" was the name of the episode. You can go watch that. See our reaction to that.
Oh man, that's
in real time. Like that was both our first time hearing that quote too. Beautiful.
It's so good.
All right, number 102,
nice.
The first winner to drop an F-bomb. I love Chris Doherty, not in a homosexual way, that's for sure.
Really gotta clarify that here.
That's a Rudy quote. You remember?
Oh yeah. I love
That's for sure.
That's for sure.
But in the sense that I think the guy should have his own sitcom. He's absolutely my favorite player of all time. I thought he was entertaining as hell, and I loved the way that he won Survivor Vanuatu. I thought Chris was entertaining for the very first minute of the season, sometimes even unintentionally, and the fact that he's on this list as much as just about anybody shouldn't surprise you. In fact, I could make a very good case that Chris Doherty might be the single most entertaining player in Survivor history. There's a reason I always refer to him as the winner and the wife beater, you know. Chris in his famous red wife beater t-shirt.
There he is.
Side view with the red wife beater. Yep. The Chris moment at number 102 is something I don't think a lot of people noticed when it happened on TV. It was the very last moment of Survivor Vanuatu. It happened right after Jeff revealed the final vote, and in my mind, it cemented Chris's status as one of the most memorable Survivor characters of all time. Want to know why? Because Chris screamed the F word and had to be bleeped on live TV. That's right, Chris Doherty's first reaction upon winning Survivor was to drop some variant of the F-bomb, and what I think he probably said was, fuck yeah, but since the entire scene was bleeped and the closed captioning didn't help, I really have no idea for sure, but from his lips you can tell it obviously started with an F. The reason this moment was so funny to me was because it perfectly fit Chris's character in Survivor Vanuatu. It was a little trashy, it was a little sleazy, and it was perfectly appropriate for a guy who would have worn a red wife beater for 39 days while being in bullshit up to his ears almost every single minute. So I enjoyed this moment because, well, that's just the way Chris's story on Survivor was supposed to have ended. It ended with a ponytail, a finger point, and an F-bomb, just the way that God had always intended.
Look at this. Chris points to his family as he
careens wildly off the stage. Yeah.
The careens. What a great phrase, careens wildly.
The second reason
amazing.
I love the ending of the Chris Doherty story was because it was totally out of line with the reaction of every other Survivor winner. Chris's reaction was just completely 100% over the top. Don't believe me? Just take a look at the chart below, which details the reactions of every Survivor winner through Guatemala, and tell me which one sort of stands out from the rest of the pack. Survivor 1, Richard opens his mouth in shock and clutches his head in astonishment. Survivor 2, Tina clutches her head in shock and looks at the ground. Survivor 3, Ethan stands up and pumps his fist in exhilaration. Survivor 4, Vesepia falls backwards to the floor in shock and astonishment. Survivor 5, Brian coolly pumps his fist and almost smiles.
Almost.
Survivor 6, Jenna is fairly calm and just smiles. Survivor 7, Sandra starts crying and stands up to hug Lil. Survivor 8, Amber bows her head in happiness and stands up to give Rob a kiss. Survivor 9, Chris screams some variant of the F word, points at his family, then rushes off camera to hug them. Survivor 10, Tom hugs Katie, then raises his hand to give thanks to Jeff. Survivor 11, Danny looks up and silently mouths, "Thank you, Jesus."
Some variant of the F word points at his family. Yeah, he just straight up gets out of there.
Yeah, he just bolted.
He bolted. He wanted to celebrate with his family.
So tell me, which one of these reactions doesn't really fit with the rest of the list? You think it could have been the guy who cursed on live TV, the guy who happened to wear a red wife beater all throughout the season, the guy who lied to his fiancée even after the game was over by telling her he had been voted out at the final 6, just because I wanted to surprise her? So anyway, Chris's exuberant reaction to winning Vanuatu has always made me laugh. It was also the perfect bookend to what I consider one of the most entertaining storylines ever to be seen in Survivor. It's too bad Chris never told us exactly what he screamed when he sat down to record the commentary for the Vanuatu DVD. I was hoping this mystery would have been cleared up on the DVD commentary, but sadly Chris never even mentioned it. So all we can do at this point is guess. What did Chris say at the live vote reveal that was so bad it actually had to be leaped? All I know is that it had to start with an F. Chris Hardy, potty mouth. Yes, another great part of the Chris wins Survivor scene is this guy. I have no idea who this person is, but he appears to be either Chris's brother or cousin, and he's totally mugging for the camera throughout the entire victory celebration. Check it out, this guy kills me. He's really not even congratulating Chris. All he's doing is just mugging for the camera instead. In fact, at one point, he even appears to be dry humping Chris just to get a laugh. He's awesome. All right, get that guy a white beater shirt.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow. Yeah, Chris, I do think he's one of the most entertaining
for sure
we've seen, and definitely one of the best stories.
Mm-hmm.
Number
101. Those cheating Lewis kids. I don't. All right.
Jenna Lewis.
This moment is. Jenna Lewis. Yeah. Okay. This moment isn't funny in a ha-ha way. It's more of a quiet kind of funny. Or maybe just funny irony. I don't know. All I know is that I had to include it on the list. Because what are the odds that a brother and a sister would exit the game in exactly the same way? One of the best moments of every Survivor season was that players' loved ones come out to the island. It usually happens late in the season. It's a very emotional episode, and we've had some very memorable moments happen in these loved one visits. In fact, one of my favorite happens to take place during Survivor All-Stars. Episode 13 was the famous loved ones visit in All-Stars, and the challenge in this episode was that the players' loved ones had to eat a piece of gross food in order to spend a night on the island. Tom's son was there, Rupert's wife was there, etc. But the highlight for me was what happened to Jenna Lewis's brother, Jay, in round 4. Is it Jai? I'll say it's Jay. G.I.Y. Lewis became the first loved one to ever be eliminated from Survivor for cheating. Jenna hugs Jay. Aw. You see, the entire point of the challenge was that the loved ones had to eat increasingly disgusting pieces of gross food. If they down one item fast enough, they move on to the next round, and so on until the only one loved one had won the reward. The loved ones did have a cup of water they could drink from, but only after they had finished their item, and Jeff had given them the okay. Jeff had explained this rule to loved ones at the start, and everyone seemed okay with it, at least until round 4. Round 4 required the loved ones to eat a giant tarantula, and Jay started off strong. He happily popped the tarantula in his mouth before he forgot the rules for a moment and accidentally took a sip of water. You can see in the screen caps below. Jay reaches for his cup, he takes a sip of water, and Jeff busts him for it. Jeff says that Jay is disqualified for drinking water, and Jay obviously disagrees. He gets a look on his face like, you never told us that, and Jeff gently reminds him that he did. So Jay has to leave the game, and it's clear that he's pretty pissed off about the whole thing. He does not agree with this ruling at all. There he is, the big cheater. But really, he shouldn't have felt that bad, because the exact same thing happened to his sister just 2 episodes later. Part 2 of the Lewis Probst feud happens to the Lewis Probst feud. Happens during the finale. We're down to the final 3, and now it's time for the dreaded hands on the immunity idol challenge. Jenna, Amber, and Rob are standing on raised poles in the water, and they must keep one hand on the idol for as long as they can. It's the single most important moment of the game, and $1 million is at stake for whoever can stand there the longest to win immunity. It's a very, very tense moment in the game. Jeff Probst is just sitting there watching as the challenge goes on. He notices that Jenna is shifting her back foot around a lot because she has a cramp. She has a really good vantage point when she suddenly lifts her back foot up just for a second. It's just a quick movement, but it was enough for Jeff, and he disqualifies her from the challenge for lifting her foot. Of course, per Lewis family tradition, Jenna obviously doesn't believe him. She stands there for a few moments in silent protest, then jumps off the platform in a huff. It's clear that she doesn't agree with Jeff's ruling. In fact, Jenna is still angry at Jeff later that night when she snips at him at tribal council because she didn't think she lifted her foot. Jeff said that it was subtle, and it's clear that Jenna is still pissed off at him. Oh, I bet it was subtle, she says with a smile. And she immediately starts filing the lawsuit against the show in her head. Like I said, this wasn't the big haha moment on the list, but you have to get a chuckle out of the irony of it all. I mean, seriously, both Lewis kids got dragged off the island kicking and screaming over something they claimed they didn't do. In fact, I wonder if there's a family full of Lewises waiting for Jeff when he get back to the mainland. Think they followed him home and yelled at him after the taping of the finale? And can you imagine what it must have been like when Jenna and Jay played board games against each other when they were kids? Someone literally would have been punched in the face. Did either one of them end up with a Monopoly piece embedded in their skull over a failed real estate transaction? Anyway, note to self, don't play basketball against either one of the Lewis kids. They cheat, and they get pissed off if you try to call them on it.
Yes.
P.S. The second funniest part of this moment is when the producers inserted a quick Janet lifts her foot shot into the finale so they wouldn't get sued. Yeah, sure, like the camera was right there 6 inches from her foot when it happened. Whatever. P.P.S. Jenna should have won All-Stars because sure, she lifted her foot and all, but she didn't lift her foot too.
Or we'll do one more for tonight.
Okay.
That was a fun little moment.
This is...
All right, number 100. Rudy calls for a jihad.
Oh, yeah!
This moment is great because it's classic Rudy. It's totally and completely a character we fell in love with during the first season. Plus, as an added bonus, it's a moment that a lot of people forget about from All Stars. And luckily, like Rudy's jokes, this moment is short, it's blunt, and it requires absolutely no setup whatsoever. Rudy and Jenna laughing at Tribal Council number 2. Ethan, middle, is taking a dump.
Oh, I remember this moment very well. Yes. I remember it.
I do too. At the end of the second episode, Rudy got blindsided by the rest of the Saboga trap. He didn't see it coming. He thought he had been completely safe, and it's safe to say that he wasn't very happy about it. And why do I say he wasn't happy? Well, it has something to do with the fact that he actually threatened the other players with revenge in his final words. Take a listen. If I was them, I'd stay clear of me, because I got a lot of friends. That quote always cracks me up. After all, who else but Rudy Bosch would threaten to beat up the people who voted him off? But what's even funnier about the moment is the fact that it wasn't the first time that Rudy had done this. People tend to forget this, but Rudy used threats of violence all the time back in Borneo. Burnett wrote about this in his book. He mentioned how Rudy would always mutter that if anyone broke the alliance and backstabbed him, they'd be in trouble because Rudy had a lot of friends back at home. Threats of violence have been Ruby's modus operandi since day one back in Borneo. In fact, here are a few actual Rudy quotes from the 11th episode of the first season, proving that this is the way the guy had been playing Survivor all along. From a confessional: if we don't stick together, I'll have to break somebody's kneecaps. Telling Rich what would happen if somebody breaks the alliance. I'd do something to him. The rest of the alliance, I know people back at home. I'll get even. Anyway, this is an aspect of Rudy that few people really remember. He has always been a guy who threatens people into staying loyal. That's just how he plays the game. He threatened people in Borneo, he threatened people in All-Stars, and then he topped himself in his All-Star final words by all but calling for an actual jihad. And in fact, if you listen to Rudy's extended final words on the DVD, you can hear that the full interview is even worse. They actually cut it down to make Rudy seem more lovable. Because in the extended version of his call to holy war, Rudy chillingly adds, "When people lie to me, I get even. They just better watch their step for a long time, because I got a lot of friends." I mean, how much more direct can you be? The bottom line here, don't ever backstab Rudy Bosch, because if you do, you're going to die. Right, Chad?
I love that.
That's a good one to end it on.
The extended version of his call to holy war.
Even
this
worse.
was awesome. Wonderful.
There's plenty more we'll be able to get to. I mean, this is like a series in itself that we can come back to, you know?
I'd love to. Yeah, we got to do it. We got to do it. This is great.
A lot of great. And it spans all the seasons. I think we got one from every season, but Borneo, Marquesas, and Guatemala, I think so far.
Yeah, I think so far. So. It's been real good. I do like that it's highlighting kind of all of them. I mean, it makes sense. He's got 115 that he's writing about here, but very entertaining writing style. Has been making me crack up. Yeah, he's been making me crack up while I'm reading. It's
and he's
great.
Still out there. I still see him commenting on Survivor Reddits and stuff. And,
that's great.
I see. He did leave back when I posted in the Reddit for Thailand questions. I think he was the one who added in the bit about Gandia, some sort of clarification on the whole Ted and Gandia incident too.
Oh,
so
yeah.
He gave a comment for our video back then.
Cool.
But yeah, so if you see this, then
yeah, if you see that,
great job.
Thank you for it's extremely entertaining. I love your writing style, and I look forward to reading more because this is cracking me up.
And we didn't preface this in the beginning, where Alec, if you're new to the channel, Alec's been watching from the beginning. I've been taking him along, so he only knows up to the point of when this is being written. We've only seen up through Guatemala, so
yeah,
it's like a nice. We're in a time capsule now. We're going back and reliving it. It's a nice way to reflect back on some the best moments and random little funny moments you might not remember too.
Have to break
Yeah.
somebody's kneecaps after all, you know.
Survivor's great. You know,
Survivor is great. I'm this is fun. I like this
it's
a lot.
fun to get back into it. We can throw this in whenever we want. And just do some more.
Yeah.
But only a few weeks to go until we watch the premiere of Survivor Panama. So
It's gonna be pretty great.
looking forward to that. Get back in. I'm already back in the Survivor mood here.
Yeah, definitely feeling it.
All right. Well.
All right.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, what video should our viewers go and watch next?
They should go check out one of our several Survivor simulations that we did called Tarqaron All Stars. And
Which
just
one do you have in mind?
Do the first one.
Tarqaron All Stars, yes, Survivor Simulation, yeah, from Brant Steele, the website. You might have heard of it.
Yeah.
We did a great fun season of Survivor, played out with a bunch of characters from things we reviewed, and it's a lot of fun.
But it's a lot of fun because it gets to massage what we like, all of what we like, all on the channel in one video.
Gets to massage.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Massaging it, yeah.
Works it all in. In there.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, well, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. Like the video. Leave a comment. Let us know your thoughts. I mean, we're just going to have a little snippets. And then this is a countdown. So this is actually his list going up. And greatness. I mean, if
great ones already.
Rudy calling for a Jihad is number 100. We're in for it.
We're in for it. I mean, heck, he's a snake. He lies. That's one of my all-time favorites, right there.
Yeah. Also, side note, check out that if you have time as well. Our reaction to that episode.
Yeah.
Our whole
Go do that.
was a lot of fun. All right. And then click the link in the description for our social media too. Okay.
All right.
Take care.